Working in politics full stop helps you in raising small children, because if you work in politics, you have to learn to deal with petulance, impatience, great demands on your, unlimited reserves of patience and understanding.
That was Paula Matthewson, just one of the people I'm going to be speaking to today, discussing just one of the skills she felt she developed as a political staffer back in the early 90s. I'm James Purser, and this is Purser Explores the World. For those of you who don't follow me on the social medias, I suffer from a terrible affliction. I'm a bit of a politics wonk. Symptoms include ranty postings, occasional angry bloggings, and a constant low-level feeling of someone is wrong on the internet. As part of this affliction, I read many different blogs and follow a number of other sufferers on Twitter, often attempting to engage in complex conversations about complex issues through the medium of 140 characters. Now, a few months back, a new political blog site sprung up. AusVotes2013 is the brainchild of Paula Matthewson, a one-time political staffer who got her start doing comms work for John Howard just after he lost the leadership of the Liberal Party for the last time. Paula's brainchild was a blog that drew together writers from across the political spectrum. Rather than start yet another partisan blog and try to dress it up as independent, Paula wanted to build a place where people could discuss issues and policies, engage in debate, and yet avoid the sort of, if you're not for us, you're a Guinness mentality that seems to be rife on other sites. The breadth of writers that Paula has managed to attract has impressed me, and as has the quality of both the writing and the conversation around the articles. Where normally you would expect to see the sort of commentary that would embarrass a fifth grader, generally the comments on the site have been respectful, if robust. So anyway, I decided I would see if I could get Paula and some of the writers from AusVotes2013 and see if they would be interested in sitting down and having a bit of a chat. Turns out they were more than happy to spend some of their weekend talking about who they are and why they write for AusVotes2013. In fact, in the following interview, I get to chat with Paula herself, Andrew Tiedt, who we've met before a couple of episodes ago, Ed Butler, Gibb, and Damian Walker. Paula, we might start with you first. You're described as a former Liberal staffer in your Twitter bio, which I didn't. You can tell I've done the deep and heavy internet research here. So, what is your background?
My background is 25 years working in and around politics. I started out in communications, so I was a PR dolly a long time ago, got involved in politics and moved to Canberra to work as John Howard's media advisor, not long after he lost the leadership in 1989. So I worked for him for 4 years and then got out of politics because I happened to have a baby along the way, and you can't work 14-hour days and raise a baby, and went into the world of lobbying, which is what I did for 20 years before I gave it all up and decided to work as a freelance writer instead.
So did you find that being John Howard's PR manager helped you when it came to raising small children?
Look, working in politics full stop helps you in raising small children, because if you work in politics, you have to learn to deal with petulance, impatience, great demands on your, unlimited reserves of patience and understanding. But yes, but you can only have one child at a time, I've discovered.
You can actually have multiple births.
Oh, you can have multiple births, yes, but one was enough for me.
All right, we'll move on. Ed, what is your background?
I studied economics at university and realised pretty promptly after becoming a nominal economist that I wasn't particularly good at it, and fell into the sort of running the media and communications part of the company that I was working for. At about the same time as I fell into that, I also fell into writing a satirical blog with some friends who I also worked with called Things Bogans Like, which sort of took on a bit of a life of its own for a few years and turned into a a double book deal for a while, so that was a surreal couple of years. And then when I quit that job, and the guys I wrote the books with sort of scattered to the four corners of the planet, it turned out that I had different skills than I did going into that job, so I fell into environmental work. So I work with in the environmental lobby now as a communications advisor.
Cool. Okay, moving on. Damian.
Good morning.
You have an interesting photo on your Skype, which seems to hark back to young Einstein.
Yeah, no, it wasn't quite that long ago. But yeah, my background is in a lot of mixed types of businesses, I guess. I was in the pay TV industry for 5 or 6 years, and I've worked with Telstra in mobile telephony. Spent a bit of time in the public service, working as an area manager with Centrelink. And I managed one of their call centres down here in Launceston for a couple of years. And I started writing online maybe a year or so ago, and found that I quite enjoyed it. And then when I saw what Paula was doing with AusVotes, I sent her a note and said I'd like to come on board if she thought that I had anything worth publishing, and here we are.
Now, whereabouts are you from?
You dropped out then. What did you say?
I'm having problems with my call recording software. It's causing conflict, so bear with me. Sorry about that.
Cool.
Okay, Hel, where are you from?
I'm thinking that means that this is my turn, James. So I'll just make that assumption as the last one left. So I come from, again, another communications background person, but in a slightly different direction. I've worked in the community sector for 15 years or more. A lot of times in policy and communications, so where you tend to be the only bod, banging on journalist door, trying to get them to write about poverty and, poor people and all that sort of stuff. And then for my sins, I got involved in politics and share some of Paula's thoughts on what that's like at the other end of the political spectrum. So I worked for the Greens for quite a few years on a few election campaigns and in Parliament, and no longer a party member after being elected to my local council for 4 years, which was an experience. And now I work for a union, again doing research.
All right, Andrew, we've already met you before. You were the law talking guy who we spoke to about the worrying changes to right to silence laws in New South Wales. Now, one thing I've noticed is that you're a very broad church.
That's unfair.
You brought this group together to make AusVotes2013. What was the idea behind it?
I was thinking about, I was pondering whether the media would step up to the plate for this election. The traditional media would step up to the plate, and thought, well, if they don't, and it's likely that they wouldn't, then it's left to the online community, to social media to do so instead. So I thought, I'll set up a little website or a little blog, invite some writers, and we'll just have a bit of fun for 6 weeks. And then, of course, the election date was announced early, and so having set up the blog in December, I then had to move quickly in February to invite the writers that I'd been stalking on Twitter to come on board, and as Damian said, and a number of others approached me. And very quickly we went from no writers to 15 and now about 25, and across the political spectrum, as you pointed out. And that's exactly what I hope to have, a range of perspectives that are not ranty, balanced, nuanced, coloured, interesting, so that people could come along and read these perspectives because they're missing out on them from the traditional media.
Nary a sign of an IPA member at all. You did well.
Well, I don't think if there's an IPA member amongst us, they're very, very quiet.
Now, you've gone from being, oh, this will be fun, let's set this up, to, holy crap, they've called it early, let's get this going, to winning an award.
Well, I think we really did find our niche very quickly. There was not only an interest in a political blog that covered all of those perspectives, but we were embraced so vigorously by the readership that I think it took us all by surprise. And what seems to have grown out of it is not only the value of the writing, but the conversations that come out of it. So all of the writers engage very generously in the comment section and elsewhere on Facebook or Twitter, talking through the issues with their readers. And I think that's what that was reflected in the site winning the award, because it had been responded to so positively.
Now, you do have a very active reader base, and loath as I am to read the comments on any internet forum site, it doesn't actually seem to be quite respectful on AusVotes.
It does. We have we've got one-line comments policy, which is, if you act like a jerk, don't expect your comment to be published. And most people do behave very, very well. And on the occasion that they don't, I just delete their comment. It's my website, and I can do what I like.
But I think, Paula, you wrote a blog post about that exact kind of increase in the tone of the conversation, particularly with people wanting to engage on sort of how government works and how policy is made, and not knowing how to do that. And I think it was Noli who said, wanting to ask, the so-called stupid questions, but not wanting to be laughed at or, being made fun of for being, not knowing this sort of stuff. And I think that's been one of the successes of the tone of the blog, is that people have felt quite comfortable to come in and go, how does this work and where do I find out more information?
I've been, I shouldn't say surprised, but I guess, reminded that there are plenty of people out there who are keen, who are interested in politics, but just don't have the knowledge that most of us have picked up either through study or through our active participation. And so, a couple of times I've written a post and thought, this is so straightforward, how could it possibly add value? And quite often they're the ones that people respond to the most, because it tells them what they want to know so that they can have a deeper understanding of what's happening.
That's been really
the other
interesting.
thing on that point, I suppose, is that with the kind of posts we're often writing, we're trying to, I guess, explain policy and talk about this idea or that idea, or, this party's pushing this particular approach to something. And that gives us a chance to go and read up on it and read the speeches or the policy announcements or whatever they've published on the issue, then provide a summary, which means we're really well placed. And someone says, well, what about, the small business, or what about this particular ethnic group or this particular social issue? How will that be affected by this? And we're very well placed to assist them and say, well, this is what I think about that particular issue.
An example of that was the Western Sydney special you did when Jill Gillard had her special, if the mountain won't come to Muhammad, then Muhammad should go to Rudy Hill.
Yeah, that came out of a conversation of frustration on Twitter between Preston Towers and Paula and myself. Preston and I both live and work in Western Sydney. I don't work in Western Sydney anymore, but we do the commute and we live here. And so it was this intense frustration at how Western Sydney is dismissed and talked about with such ignorance, and the frustration that we had about that turned into a series where we teased out some of the, the complexities of what Western Sydney is. And it had a huge response from people, because particularly people who live in Western Sydney shared that frustration about it all being lumped into one big bogan area, and the kind of real challenges around infrastructure and the real challenges around things like transport not actually getting a proper look in, and it being sort of dismissed by people in the inner city as, you've just got to get educated and we just got to educate the Western Sydney bogans with the facts and that sort of stuff, where, people living in Western Sydney know the facts. And it was really interesting to sort of see the response that got, because I think people were hungry for that kind of information.
I think the flip side of that argument also is that as someone who lives in northern Melbourne, I was constantly hearing about just Western Sydney, like just as this kind of catch-all phrase. It's like, okay, Western Sydney this, Western Sydney that. It never went any deeper, but it seemed to be the single most important thing and geographical area in the country at the time. And I had no idea what it was. And I think so what it brought to me was a bit of nuance, and it gave me some context in my, was there an analog in Melbourne that I could sort of compare it to? And there wasn't. But it really helped me sort of have an understanding of, why is this place important and why are the political parties doing what they're doing at the moment. I found it really quite enlightening.
Thank you. But I know, James, you and I had a conversation about the similarities with the Illawarra in terms of some of the, poverty and infrastructure challenges and how that feeds into things like employment. And that's why, touchstones like immigration become about all the, the boats as opposed to infrastructure pressures.
What sort of reaction did you get?
Oh, we had a really big reaction. It was huge. It was one of those things that really sort of caught people's attention as kind of demonstrating the point of the blog in that it's filling a hole that the mainstream media is, the old traditional media is just not filling. Where they were, their idea of a profile was to send a snapper out to Rooty Hill for half an hour and take some photos of some people, and therefore that's Western Sydney.
Also, they'd find the most ridiculous stereotypical example of what already people think Western Sydney is and use that as their profile, and it just reinforced the same stereotypes that already existed and added nothing to anything. And I think the fact that I saw quite a few established journos working for the SMH linking to those pieces, I thought that was it was gratifying to see that that AusVotes was getting that kind of attention, but also it was quite stunning that that these journalists for whom they have a full-time job, they're 40 hours a week to do this kind of thing. We're pointing at a bunch of amateurs to fill that gap. I found that to be just astonishing at the same time.
Doesn't that say so much about the state of media today?
It does, and I mean, I'm really pleased to see that AusVotes has created an opportunity for the traditional media journalists and those of us online to have a more positive relationship, because there's been so much snarking going on from the various battle lines. And I think once Guardian Australia finally launches, Australians will see that traditional media and the online world can work together well, because the Guardian has embraced bloggers in such an amazing way. And so that the conversation that's being started between the AusVotes writers, the AusVotes readers, and traditional media journalists will be continued and reinforced, I think, once Guardian comes online.
Now, you are such a broad church and such a wide variety of different views. As is inevitable in a lot of these things, there's always an accusation of bias.
Yes.
I think we're redefining bias.
Sorry, mate, go ahead.
I think we're redefining bias. But, it seems these days bias is anybody that says anything that doesn't meet your worldview.
In politics, I think it was always that. But you're not the ABC. But how do you handle these accusations that, let's see, you've got an article on the front page of AusVotes. I think it was, let's have a look. Ed, you are we left with the right centre?
That was just a terrible attempt at a pun. It didn't really have much merit as a headline, I should point out. I find that I'm always loath to sort of point out that the internet's changing the way we're acting, and I generally subscribe to the idea that people are people, and the internet may have some impact, but I think in this case, we all are now sort of taking our cues from a larger media conversation, and when political partisans who are in the media, sort of traditional media, are so willing to toss around accusations of bias, it becomes default for a lot of sort of amateur political partisans who now have sort of a small voice on social media and in blogs and stuff to sort of just toss around the same accusations, and it's incredibly stupid. And but the actual sort of the cognitive stuff behind it, the actual mentality behind accusations of bias is the same as it always has been. It's like everyone positions themselves in the center, wherever that may be. And then when someone disagrees with them, they're therefore assumed, like, so even if I'm trying, like, I think the example I used in the piece was like Andrew Bolt probably considers himself something of a centrist. Like, he's on the record as saying he is not of the right. He is a conservative. So he then sees anyone who takes a position that is less conservative than him, he accuses them of being a leftist, a capital L leftist. And I don't think that's entirely a load of bollocks for him. I think he actually, to some degree, buys into that. And it's the same mentality that we all have. And yeah, it's just incredibly stupid. And I just thought it'd be good to sort of try and sum that up. And it was after a particular post on our Facebook page where someone just said, "You guys are obviously a liberal front." And I was like,
obviously.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to imagine how you actually draw that conclusion from reading.
Wasn't that post made after I wrote that post about Tony Abbott? I wrote the post just after he gave his budget reply speech, and the subject was ready to lead. And the whole point of the post was, well, ready to lead is a stupid question. The issue should be, if he does lead, what will he do? Now, I like to assume that the person who put that liberal shill accusation up on Facebook read the title of the post, saw about Tony Abbott, chucked it back on Facebook, and that was as far as it went. When if they'd taken and it wasn't a long post, the 2 minutes it would have taken to read the darn piece, I think they would have understood exactly what my point was.
But it's also, I think all of us try to, I mean, I know I do, I try to keep my leftist ranting to my own blog. And, when I'm writing for AusVotes, I do try and be, stick to kind of what the policy is, what the details are, what the kind of process is, that sort of bit, and leave the sort of, when I have my rantings about privatisation and stuff, I do that on my own blog.
I'm a bit more willing to get ranty, just because I tend to believe that people aren't that rational, so I'm quite happy to sort of get. And I think Paula and I have exchanged this view a bit. It's just that I don't think people really read policy all that much. I think even a lot of really educated, engaged people don't read policy that much, and I don't even read policy all that much. I mean, there's not many policies I could really explain to people in a great deal of depth, other than the stuff that I'm particularly professionally involved in. So I think it's important that we also remember that a lot of what people consider when they're going to the ballot box is not policy oriented at all. It's a feeling about a collection of policies, and what does that say about the party, and what does it say about how they feel about where that party's going. And so I'm always quite comfortable talking, not so much about rants, but sort of talking about how does this feel, how does this policy feel, as opposed to what are the numbers and what does it mean for this particular group of people and stuff like that, which is important, but it's a strange kind of importance.
I think there's a difference between rants and passion, and
very fine line, I think.
No. I think there is actually a difference, and I will make a decision between putting a more ranty or piece on my own blog than putting it on AusVotes in the same way. But bias is about agendas. And you read something, and if you think it's biased, it's because you get a glimpse of the agenda, or sometimes it's more than a glimpse because it smacks you in the face. Whereas I'd like to think that on AusVotes, our agenda is to share our thoughts and perspectives and to have some discussion about it. And so if we're accused of being biased towards anything, I would hope it would be that.
Yeah, I think we represent a shift away from the old didactic or tribalist view of politics, where you vote Labor because your dad voted Labor, or there's still, of course, these tribal voters who simply stick to their team, and if you're not with us, you're against us. But there's this emerging, somebody calls it, people keep calling it this political class. I have difficulty with that title, but at least I think there's this emerging group of what perhaps we used to call swinging voters who really just want to inform themselves about what does each party policy suite represent for them and even for the country as a whole, rather than just voting along party lines. I think that there's this emerging third tribe who really want to inform themselves and make informed choice, and that, I think, is probably the audience that we appeal to and will always get criticised as being biased or shills from those other old line party groups, if that makes sense.
Mm.
All right. Now, we've got 3 months until the actual election. Okay. What are you going to do afterwards? Are you going to keep it going? Are you going to turn it into Oz Poll 20 blah, or...
Funny you should ask, and I haven't broached this with the writers yet, but I've been grappling with the idea of how do we keep the AusVotes brand beyond the election if we all decided as a group to continue writing together. So yeah, that's something that we'll discuss. I'm keen to, of course, with the blog having won the best blog competition in the commentary category. I'd like to see it continue, but everyone has their day jobs, everyone has their own blogs, and it's a big commitment to and everybody's doing it for free at the moment. So we need to see what happens next. But the next big step for us is that AusVotes will be part of Guardian Australia's blog hub. So we'll be getting traffic from the Guardian Australia website through to AusVotes. Now, who knows what's going to come out of that? And I think probably one of the things that may happen is that I may actually lose some of my writers. They may get picked up and paid by someone else. But they're the sorts of things that that I'm grappling with at the moment.
No one gets paid to write anything, do they?
Especially not on the internet.
No, I know.
Not enough to live on, at least.
Well, I get paid to write, but it's not fun stuff, so it's submissions and things.
Oh, yeah. I get paid to write in my real life.
Yeah.
Question before we go. Thank you very much, guys, for taking the time out. On election night, will there be an AusVotes hangout or something like that to keep track of live blog or something to keep track of the results?
I hope so.
Good question.
I think we've outsourced that to Anthony Green.
Yeah. Look, we're looking at a live chat function. There's a couple of other IT-inspired people that want to have a talk to me about their ideas, and I haven't had an opportunity yet to talk to them. So, yes, quite possibly, but we'll be, again, coming at it from the perspective, what can we provide that the rest of the media isn't? So we'll have to scrape that out as we get closer.
We have another 3 long months to go in the federal election campaign. The mainstream media is going to be full of the usual suspects pushing their usual barrows. AusVotes and other sites like it allow for new voices to join the discussion. As we saw with the Western Sydney pieces, they were able to bring a much-needed locals perspective to a debate which had become bogged down in stereotypes and personal barrows. And by doing this, they were able to influence at least some of the mainstream media reporting, with some journalists digging deeper into the articles posted by the likes of Preston Towers and Al Gibbs and creating depth where before there really wasn't any. If you have any interest in politics, then I would recommend that you keep AusVotes2013.com in your RSS reader. While you may not agree with everything written, the authors are more than willing to discuss their posts and defend their reasoning rather than either ignore you or just engage in partisanship. Alright, that's it for episode 19 of Purser Explores the World. That's right, the next episode is going to be the big 2-0. I'm still pondering what I should do to celebrate that milestone. If you have any thoughts, please let me know. Now, one more thing before I do go, redbubble.com. We actually have a couple of pieces up there, and I sold a shirt last week. I'm so proud of that. So if you want to go and have a look, redbubble.com, search for Angry Beanie. You will see our beautiful artworks, and if you want to help support us, please either purchase some stickers or purchase a shirt, and let us know how it goes. All right, see you next time.